Before we begin this incredible story, I'd love for you to hit that like button and leave a comment telling me, have you ever met someone who completely changed your life when you least expected it? Your engagement helps more people discover these stories. Now, let's dive in. The glass shattered against the marble floor of the penthouse office, and Alejandro Montero didn't even flinch. "Get out," he said, his voice cold as the Monterey winter wind that howled outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. "All of you. Now." Three specialists in white coats exchanged nervous glances. Dr. Ramirez, the most senior among them, cleared his throat. "Senor Montero, we've run every test available. Your daughter's hearing is perfect. There's nothing physically wrong with—" "Then why does she cry?" Alejandro's fist slammed against his mahogany desk. At 38 years old, he had built Montero Technologies from nothing into a billion-peso empire. He had negotiated with presidents, crushed competitors, and never lost a single battle. But for 3 months, he had been utterly defeated by the tears of a 5-year-old girl, his daughter Valentina. The doctors retreated like frightened mice, leaving Alejandro alone with the sound of his own ragged breathing. Through the glass wall of his office, he could see his assistant Daniela approaching with that look she always wore lately, a mixture of pity and exhaustion. "The new nanny is here," she announced, her voice carefully neutral. "Should I send her away like the others?" Alejandro laughed bitterly. 18 nannies in 3 months. 18 women who had walked into his home promising miracles and walked out crying themselves, defeated by his daughter's inexplicable sorrow. "What's this one's name?" "Sofia Reyes. She comes from an agency in Guadalajara. Her references are modest. He turned to stare out the window at the Sierra Madre Mountains. The last one had a doctorate in child psychology from Harvard. She lasted 4 days. Should I tell her the position has been filled? Something in Alejandro's chest tightened. Last night, he had held Valentina as she sobbed into his shoulder, her small body trembling with a grief she couldn't explain. When he'd asked her what was wrong, she had just looked at him with those enormous brown eyes, her mother's eyes, and whispered, "It hurts, Papa," inside my head. "But the doctors don't believe me." "Send her in," he said quietly. The woman who entered his office 3 minutes later was nothing like he expected. Sofia Reyes looked to be in her late 20s, with honey brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and intelligent amber eyes that seemed to assess everything in one sweeping glance. She wore a modest gray dress that had seen better days and carried herself with a strange dignity that seemed at odds with her humble appearance. Her hands, he noticed, were calloused, working hands. But what struck him most was her stillness. In a world where everyone fidgeted under his gaze, she simply stood there, waiting, as calm as deep water. "You're the new nanny candidate," he said flatly, "and you're the father who has scared away 18 women in 3 months. Her voice was warm but direct. "I counted the news articles on the drive here. Impressive, in a terrifying sort of way." Alejandro felt his eyebrow rise. "Most people who walk into this office are more concerned with impressing me than insulting me." "I'm not here to impress you, Senor Montero." Sofia's gaze was steady. "I'm here for your daughter, the one who cries every day while you throw money at specialists who clearly aren't listening to her. And you think you can do better? You, with your modest references and your second-hand dress." The words were cruel. He knew it even as they left his mouth, but something flickered in her eyes, not hurt, but something else. Recognition, perhaps, as if she had expected exactly this. "I think," Sofia said carefully, "that sometimes the most expensive experts miss what's right in front of them, because they're too busy looking for complicated answers to simple problems. My daughter's suffering is not simple." "No, but the cause might be." She took a step closer and he caught the faint scent of lavender. "When did the crying start? Exactly?" The question caught him off guard. Every specialist had asked about symptoms, triggers, patterns. None had asked for the precise beginning. 3 months ago, he said slowly. September 15th. She woke up crying and hasn't stopped since. "What happened on September 14th? Alejandro frowned. "Nothing. It was a normal day. My mother visited for dinner. My ex-fiancée Catalina stopped by to return some things she'd left behind. Valentina went to bed at 8, as always." Something shifted in Sofia's expression, a slight narrowing of her eyes that was there and gone in an instant. "I'd like to meet her," she said. "Valentina." "Today, if possible. She's with her grandmother right now. My mother practically lives here since—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat. "Since her mother passed away," Sofia finished gently. "I read about that too. Car accident 2 years ago. I'm sorry. The sympathy in her voice felt different from the empty condolences he'd received from hundreds of people. It felt real somehow, heavy with understanding. Why do you want this job? He asked suddenly. The pay isn't exceptional. The hours are brutal. And the child you'd be caring for apparently drives every caregiver to madness. Sophia's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Because some children need someone who will actually listen to them, Señor Montero, even when what they're saying doesn't make sense to anyone else. Before he could respond, a sound echoed through the penthouse. A child's wail, high and heartbreaking. Valentina. Alejandro moved toward the door, but Sophia was faster. She was already halfway down the hallway when he caught up to her, and something about the way she moved struck him as odd. Not like a nanny rushing to comfort a charge, but like someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Someone trained for emergencies. They reached the living room to find his mother, Doña Carmen, standing over Valentina with barely concealed frustration. The older woman was immaculately dressed in Chanel, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her expression one of practiced martyrdom. She started again, Carmen announced, her voice sharp. I was simply brushing her hair and she began screaming. Honestly, Alejandro, this child needs discipline, not more coddling from strangers. But Sophia wasn't listening to Carmen. She had already dropped to her knees beside Valentina, who sat curled in a ball on the expensive Persian rug, her small hands pressed against her right ear. Hello, pequeña, Sophia said softly. My name is Sophia. Can you tell me where it hurts? Valentina looked up, her face streaked with tears, and something extraordinary happened. The crying stopped, not gradually, but all at once, like a switch had been flipped. You have kind eyes, the little girl whispered, like my mama did. Alejandro felt his heart crack open. Can I look at your ear? Sophia asked. The one that hurts? I promise I'll be very gentle. Valentina hesitated, then nodded slowly. As Sophia leaned closer, her expression shifted into something Alejandro couldn't quite read. Concentration, perhaps, or recognition. Señor Montero, Sophia said, her voice carefully controlled. I need to speak with you privately. Right now. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my mother. Sophia stood, and when she turned to face him, her eyes were blazing with something fierce and urgent. No, she said quietly. I really do not think I can. The door to Alejandro's study closed with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a gunshot. Sophia stood with her back straight, her modest dress suddenly seeming like armor, while he waited for an explanation that he sensed would change everything. Well, he demanded, what was so urgent that you had to drag me away from my own daughter? Sophia's jaw tightened. When was the last time anyone actually looked inside Valentina's ear? I mean, really looked, with proper equipment and proper lighting? She's seen 4 ENT specialists. They all examined her ears. Did they use an otoscope? Did they check beyond the surface? Alejandro felt a chill run down his spine. What exactly are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Sophia said slowly, that your daughter has something lodged deep in her ear canal. Something small enough to miss on a casual examination, but large enough to cause constant pressure and pain. I could see the shadow of it when she tilted her head toward the light. That's impossible. She's had MRIs, CT scans, all focused on her brain, looking for neurological causes. Sophia's voice was sharp now, because that's what expensive specialists do. They look for complicated, expensive problems. They don't check for a foreign object because they assume someone already ruled that out. Alejandro stared at her. You saw this in 30 seconds. I saw a child pressing her hand against one specific ear. I saw her flinch when her grandmother touched that side of her head. And I saw something that shouldn't be there when the light hit her ear canal at the right angle. Sophia crossed her arms. The question isn't what I saw, Señor Montero. The question is how a 5-year-old got something lodged so deep in her ear that it's caused 3 months of agony. The implication hung in the air between them, heavy and poisonous. You cannot possibly be suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything. But her eyes told a different story. I'm saying your daughter needs to see an ENT specialist today. One with a proper extraction setup, and perhaps someone should ask her how she hurt her ear in the first place. 20 minutes later, they were in the back of Alejandro's private car. Valentina nestled between them. His mother had protested furiously at being excluded, but something in Sophia's quiet insistence had made Alejandro dismiss Carmen's objections. The specialist they saw, Dr. Herrera, the best in Monterrey, went pale when she finally located what Sophia had suspected. "It's a small bead," she said grimly, showing them the image on her screen. "Lodged deep against the eardrum. The pressure it's creating would cause constant pain. How it got there without perforating the drum is nothing short of miraculous." Alejandro couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "How did no one see this before?" he finally managed. "It's positioned in a blind spot. Unless you're specifically looking for a foreign object, unless you have reason to suspect one, it's easy to miss with standard examinations." Dr. Herrera looked at Sophia with obvious respect. "How did you know?" "I didn't know. I just listened." Sophia's hand rested gently on Valentina's shoulder. She kept saying it hurt inside her head. Sometimes children mean exactly what they say. The extraction was quick, 15 minutes under light sedation, and when Valentina woke up, the change was immediate and miraculous. She blinked, touched her ear tentatively, and then broke into a smile so radiant it hurt to look at. "Papa," she breathed, "it doesn't hurt anymore. The noise is gone." Alejandro gathered his daughter in his arms, tears streaming down his face. Over her small shoulder, he met Sophia's eyes and saw something there, not triumph, but profound sadness, as if this happy ending reminded her of something painful. "Señor Montero," Dr. Herrera said quietly, pulling him aside while Sophia distracted Valentina with a picture book. "I have to ask, this bead didn't get there by accident. The position, the depth, someone deliberately placed it in her ear canal. Someone who knew what they were doing." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this was intentional. And whoever did this wanted your daughter to suffer without anyone understanding why." The drive back to the penthouse was silent. Valentina had fallen asleep against Sophia's shoulder, exhausted from 3 months of pain finally ending. Alejandro watched them, his daughter's peaceful face, Sophia's protective posture, and felt his world rearranging itself. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Those words are inadequate, but thank you." Sophia didn't look up from Valentina's sleeping face. "Don't thank me yet. We still don't know who did this to her, and something tells me finding out won't be pleasant. You have a theory. I have observations. You have a theory. I saw your face when Dr. Herrera mentioned it was deliberate." Finally, she met his gaze. "You know who had access to your daughter that night, September 14th. You know who would benefit from making her seem troubled, unstable." Alejandro thought of Catalina, his ex-fiancée, who had always resented Valentina for existing, who had broken their engagement when he refused to send his daughter to boarding school, who had stopped by that night to return some belongings and had insisted on saying goodnight to the child she claimed to love. And he thought of his mother, his devoted, controlling, ever-present mother, who had never approved of any woman in his life except Catalina, who had been urging him for months to consider institutional care for his apparently disturbed daughter, who had been alone with Valentina that very morning, brushing her hair near her ear when the screaming started. "The job is yours," he said roughly. "Whatever salary you want. Name your terms." Sophia's expression flickered with something unreadable. "I don't need your money, Señor Montero. I need access to your household, to your daughter, and to the truth about what's happening in that penthouse." "That sounds less like a nanny and more like an investigator. Maybe that's what your daughter needs." Sophia's voice was soft but steel-lined underneath. "Someone who will protect her from whoever did this. Someone who won't be intimidated by wealth or status or family connections. And you won't be intimidated." For the first time, something like a smile crossed her face. "I've faced worse than a billionaire with trust issues and a family full of secrets. Much worse." It should have sounded like arrogance. Instead, it sounded like a warning. When they arrived at the penthouse, Carmen was waiting in the foyer with barely contained fury and Catalina Vega at her side. The ex-fiancé looked as polished as ever. Designer dress, perfect makeup, predatory smile. "Alejandro, darling," Catalina purred. "Your mother called me. She's concerned about this stranger you've brought into your home. We both are." Sophia's arm tightened almost imperceptibly around sleeping Valentina. "The stranger," Alejandro said coldly, "just saved my daughter from 3 months of pain that 18 specialists couldn't diagnose. I think she's earned the right to stay." "But surely a proper background check," Carmen began, "has been completed." Alejandro lied smoothly, making a mental note to actually run one. "Sophia comes highly recommended. She'll be starting immediately." Catalina's eyes narrowed as she studied Sophia. "We've met before, haven't we? Your face is familiar." Sophia's expression didn't change, but Alejandro noticed her shoulders stiffen slightly. "I don't believe so, Señora. I would remember." No, I'm certain. Catalina tapped one manicured finger against her lips. Perhaps it will come to me. Later that night, after Valentina had been tucked into bed, peacefully, without tears, for the first time in 3 months, Alejandro found Sofia standing on the terrace, staring out at the city lights of Monterrey. She's sleeping, he said softly, joining her at the railing. I know, I checked on her twice already. Sofia didn't turn around. She's going to be fine physically, but someone hurt her deliberately, Senor Montero, and that person is still in her life. I'm going to find out who did this, and when I do... What? Now she did turn, and her eyes were fierce. You'll destroy them? Use your money and power to crush whoever hurt your daughter? She shook her head. That's exactly what whoever did this expects. They're counting on your rage to make you careless, to make mistakes. Then what do you suggest? Patience. Observation. Let them think they've won. Let them believe Valentina is cured and the mystery is solved. And while they're celebrating, we watch. We gather evidence. We find out not just who, but why. Alejandro studied her face in the moonlight, the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the determined set of her jaw. Who are you really, Sofia Reyes? Because you're not just a nanny from Guadalajara, you're something else entirely. For a long moment she was silent. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm someone who knows what it's like to have everything taken away by people who were supposed to protect you. Someone who learned the hard way that money and power can corrupt absolutely. She met his eyes. And someone who made a promise a long time ago to never let another child suffer the way I did. Before he could respond, she walked away, leaving him alone with the city lights and 1,000 questions burning in his chest. 3 weeks had passed since Sofia became Valentina's nanny, and the transformation in the little girl was nothing short of miraculous. She laughed now, actually laughed, a sound that echoed through the penthouse like music after a long silence. Alejandro found himself coming home earlier and earlier, telling himself it was to see his daughter's progress. But he was honest enough to admit, at least to himself in the quiet hours of the night, that it was also to catch glimpses of Sofia. She was an enigma wrapped in a mystery. Her knowledge seemed impossibly vast. She spoke 5 languages, could discuss Renaissance art with the same ease as modern economics, and had once casually corrected his CFO's analysis of their quarterly projections. When he'd raised an eyebrow, she'd simply shrugged and said she read a lot. You're staring again, Sofia observed without looking up from the book she was reading to Valentina. It's becoming a habit, Senor Montero. Perhaps if you were less interesting, I'd find something else to look at. Valentina giggled. Papa has hard eyes, Sofia, like in the cartoons. Your father has serious eyes, Sofia corrected, but there was a hint of warmth in her voice. He's probably calculating how much productivity he's losing by standing here. Actually, I was calculating how long it would take you to acknowledge my presence. Apparently, the answer is 47 seconds. I acknowledged you internally after 12 seconds. I simply chose not to validate your need for attention. Valentina looked between them with the knowing expression that only children possess. Are you two going to get married? Grandma says Papa needs a wife, but she doesn't like you, Sofia. She says you're sneaky. The air in the room shifted. Sofia's smile remained fixed, but something flickered in her eyes. Hurt, perhaps, or something darker. Your grandmother is entitled to her opinions, Sofia said carefully. Now, should we finish this chapter about the princess who saved herself? Later that evening, after Valentina was asleep, Alejandro cornered Sofia in the kitchen. She was preparing herbal tea with the methodical precision she brought to everything, her movements graceful despite the modest nature of the task. We need to talk about my mother, he said. That's not necessary. She's been making your life difficult. I've noticed the comments, the cold shoulders, the way she questions your every decision. Sofia poured the hot water with steady hands. I've dealt with difficult employers before. Your mother is simply protective. It's natural. No. Alejandro stepped closer. It's not natural. It's calculated. And I'm starting to wonder why she's so determined to drive you away when you're the only person who's helped Valentina in months. Sofia finally met his eyes, and what he saw there made his breath catch. Not fear, not anger, but a profound weariness. The exhaustion of someone carrying an enormous weight. Your mother sees me as a threat, she said quietly. Not to Valentina, but to you. To the order she's established in this house. To her control over your life. Her control? Who suggested sending Valentina to boarding school? Who recommended Catalina as your perfect match? Who has opinions on every business decision, every personal choice, every breath you take? Sophia's voice remained calm, but her words cut deep. Your mother doesn't want a nanny who might give you ideas about independence. She wants a servant who knows her place. Alejandro felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're saying I'm not saying anything. Sophia set down her cup. I'm asking you to think about who benefits from Valentina being seen as troubled. Who gains power if you're distracted, guilty, desperate? Who suggested Catalina come back into your life precisely when your daughter needed you most? That's a serious accusation. I haven't accused anyone. Her eyes held his. I've simply presented observations. What you do with them is your choice, Señor Montero. It always has been. She walked away, leaving her tea untouched, and Alejandro's mind reeling. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Alejandro was in his home office when Daniela announced that Detective Inspector Marcos Delgado was asking to see him. The name sent ice through his veins. Delgado was the investigator who had handled his wife Isabella's car accident 2 years ago, the case that had been ruled an accident despite questions that never received answers. Detective, Alejandro said carefully, rising from his desk. This is unexpected. I apologize for the intrusion, Señor Montero. Delgado was a weathered man in his 50s, with eyes that had seen too much. I wanted to inform you personally. We've received new information about your wife's accident. Evidence that suggests it may not have been an accident at all. The world tilted. What kind of evidence? A witness has come forward. Someone who was too afraid to speak before, but who saw a vehicle deliberately force your wife's car off the road. They've provided a description of the driver. Delgado paused. The description matches someone in your household, Señor Montero. Who? I'm not at liberty to say yet. The investigation is ongoing. Delgado handed him a card. But I would advise you to be careful about who you trust. The people closest to us are often the ones capable of the greatest betrayal. After the detective left, Alejandro sat motionless for what felt like hours. Isabella, his beautiful, vibrant wife who had died on a rainy night 2 years ago. The accident that had never made sense. She had been an excellent driver. The road conditions hadn't been severe, and she'd been heading to a dinner with his mother and Catalina. A dinner she'd never arrived at. A soft knock interrupted his spiral. Sophia stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Valentina wants to show you a drawing she made, she said, but I can tell her you're busy. No. Alejandro's voice was hoarse. No, I want to see her. I want to see my daughter. He spent the rest of the afternoon with Valentina, drawing pictures and building towers from blocks, pretending everything was normal while his mind raced through 2 years of memories. His mother's excessive sympathy after Isabella's death, Catalina's convenient reappearance to comfort him, the way both women had gradually assumed control of his household, his decisions, his life. That night he couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m, he wandered to the kitchen for water and found Sophia already there, standing by the window in a silk robe, her honey hair loose around her shoulders. Can't sleep either? She asked without turning around. Too many thoughts. He joined her at the window. The detective who came today, he was investigating my wife's death. He said there's new evidence it wasn't an accident. Sophia was very still. I'm sorry. Are you? He studied her profile. Because sometimes I get the feeling you know more about what's happening in this house than you let on. That you came here with an agenda beyond taking care of my daughter. Everyone has agendas, Señor Montero. The question is whether they align with yours. And does yours? She finally turned to face him, and in the moonlight her eyes seemed to hold entire galaxies of secrets. I want to protect your daughter from whoever hurt her. I want to see justice done for whatever happened to your wife. And I want... She stopped, swallowing hard. What do you want? I want to finish what I started 2 years ago, before everything was taken from me. What happened 2 years ago? Sophia's laugh was bitter. I trusted the wrong people. I tried to do the right thing, and I was destroyed for it. My career, my reputation, my entire life, gone in the span of a month. She met his eyes. I used to be someone, Señor Montero. Someone with power and influence and the ability to make a difference. Now I'm a nanny who cleans up after wealthy families and pretends not to notice their secrets. Who were you? For a long moment she didn't answer. Then, slowly, she reached into her robe pocket and withdrew a worn photograph. She handed it to him, and Alejandro felt his heart stop. The photo showed a younger Sophia in a white coat, standing in front of a prestigious medical center in Mexico City. The nameplate on her coat read, Dr. Sofia Reyes, Chief of Pediatric Neurology. You're a doctor, he breathed. I was a doctor, one of the best pediatric specialists in the country. If you believe the awards I used to have. Her voice was flat. Until someone accused me of malpractice, falsified records, bribed witnesses, destroyed my career with lies that I couldn't disprove. I lost my license, my home, my reputation, everything. Who did this to you? Sophia's eyes met his, and what he saw there chilled him to the bone. Someone very wealthy, very powerful, someone with connections in every hospital, every courtroom, every boardroom in Mexico. She took back the photograph. Someone who didn't like that I was getting too close to the truth about a child who was being hurt by her own family. Alejandro's blood ran cold. Sofia, the family's name was Vega. Her voice was barely a whisper. The child was the granddaughter of one of the most influential families in Monterrey, and the woman who orchestrated my destruction was engaged to marry into the Montero family. Catalina. The name tasted like poison. Your mother helped her. They needed me gone because I was about to report them for child abuse. Tears gleamed in Sofia's eyes. The little girl I tried to save died 3 months after I lost my license. Heart failure, they said. But I know the truth. I know what they did to her, and I could never prove it. Alejandro felt the floor shift beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew about his family, about Catalina, about the world he lived in, crumbled into dust. That's why you're here, he said slowly. Not just for Valentina, for justice. I'm here because when I heard about a little girl crying for months while doctors couldn't find anything wrong, it sounded too familiar, too much like what happened before. Sophia's voice broke. I couldn't save that other child, but maybe I can save yours. And maybe along the way I can prove what they did, what they're still doing. Alejandro reached out and took her hand. It was trembling. You're not alone anymore, he said quietly. Whatever they've done, whatever they're planning, we'll face it together. I promise you that. Sofia looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, and for the first time since he'd met her, she let him see her vulnerability, the fear, the hope, the desperate need to believe that this time, things might be different. Be careful, Alejandro, she whispered. The people who destroyed my life, they won't hesitate to destroy yours too, and your daughter is right in the middle of it all. Outside, unseen in the shadows of the garden below, a figure watched the two silhouettes in the moonlit window. Catalina Vega's perfectly manicured nails dug into the cold stone wall as she observed the intimate scene unfolding above her. The way Alejandro held that woman's hand, the way their bodies leaned toward each other like magnets drawn together by invisible forces. She had waited too long, sacrificed too much, to let some disgraced doctor ruin everything now. 2 years of careful planning, 2 years of playing the sympathetic friend while Carmen did the dirty work. 2 years of watching Alejandro mourn the wife she had helped eliminate. And now this stranger appeared from nowhere, threatening to unravel every thread of their carefully woven web. Catalina reached for her phone, her smile turning cold and calculating as she composed the message she would send to Carmen. The words were simple, elegant, deadly. We have a problem. The nanny knows. It's time for Plan B. Above her, the two silhouettes finally separated, unaware that their stolen moment of connection had just painted targets on both their backs. The game was changing, and Catalina Vega had absolutely no intention of losing. Not when she was this close to having everything she had ever wanted. The morning sun had barely risen over Monterrey when the first blow landed. Alejandro arrived at his office to find the board of directors assembled without his knowledge, their faces arranged in expressions of practiced concern. At the head of the table sat his mother, Carmen, dressed in funeral black, as if mourning something that hadn't died yet. "What is this?" he demanded. "An intervention, darling." Carmen's voice dripped with false sympathy. "The board has concerns about your recent behavior, your judgment, your fitness to lead this company." Roberto Vega, Catalina's father and the largest minority shareholder, slid a folder across the table. "We've received disturbing reports about your mental state, Alejandro. Erratic decisions, an unhealthy attachment to a household employee, neglecting critical business meetings to play house with your daughter. This is absurd. Is it?" Carmen stood, and her eyes were cold as winter. "You've invited a stranger into your home, a woman with no verifiable background, no references we can confirm. A woman who has convinced you that your own mother might be capable of harming her grandchild. Sofia found what was hurting Valentina, something your specialists missed for 3 months. Sofia." Carmen's lips curled around the name like it was poison. "Yes, let's talk about Sofia. Or should I say, Dr. Sofia Reyes, the disgraced physician who lost her license for malpractice and fraud. The folder Roberto had provided contained newspaper clippings, court documents, medical board rulings, every piece of evidence that had been used to destroy Sofia's career, now weaponized against Alejandro. "She's a con artist," Catalina said from the doorway, her timing too perfect to be coincidental. "She targets wealthy families with sick children, gains their trust, and then," she let the implication hang, "that's a lie." Alejandro's voice shook with rage. "Sofia was set up. You destroyed her career because she tried to expose what you were doing to that child." The temperature in the room dropped. Roberto's face went pale, then red with fury. "How dare you?" he hissed. "My granddaughter died of natural causes. The accusations against my family were investigated and dismissed. Investigated by people you paid off, dismissed by judges who owed you favors." Carmen stepped between them, her hand on Alejandro's arm. "Sweetheart, listen to yourself. This woman has poisoned your mind. She's turned you against your own family, your oldest friends. Can't you see what she's doing?" "I see what you're doing, Mother. What you've been doing for years." Alejandro pulled away from her touch. "I see the control, the manipulation, the way you've isolated me from everyone who might tell me the truth." "The truth?" Carmen's mask of maternal concern finally cracked, revealing something cold and desperate underneath. "The truth is that everything I've done has been to protect this family, to protect you. That woman your father married would have destroyed us all. And when Isabella started asking questions, started digging into things that weren't her concern," the room went silent. Even Roberto looked shocked. "What did you just say?" Alejandro's voice was barely a whisper. Carmen realized her mistake too late. Her face went white, and she took a step backward. "Mother, what did you do to Isabella?" "Nothing. I did nothing. I simply meant that she was becoming difficult, asking about the company finances, the investments I'd made, the investments." Pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. "You were embezzling from the company. Isabella found out. And you. It wasn't supposed to happen that way." Carmen's voice cracked. "Catalina was only supposed to scare her, force her off the road, damage the car. We didn't know she would lose control completely. We didn't know she would die." The confession hung in the air like a death sentence. Alejandro felt something inside him shatter. His mother, his own mother, had killed his wife, had spent 2 years comforting him, helping him grieve, all while knowing she was responsible for his pain. "Get out." His voice didn't sound like his own. "All of you, get out of my building." "Alejandro, be reasonable." Roberto stepped forward. "We have the votes to remove you as CEO. Your shares are substantial, but combined with what Carmen controls and our family's holdings, take the company." Alejandro was already moving toward the door. "Take everything. I don't care anymore." Sir, he drove home in a daze, breaking every speed limit, his mind replaying his mother's words over and over. Isabella, his beautiful, curious, brave Isabella, who had only ever wanted to protect their family, murdered because she had stumbled onto secrets she was never meant to find. When he burst through the penthouse doors, he found chaos. The apartment was being ransacked. 3 men in suits were carrying boxes of documents while a 4th argued with Sofia, who stood in front of Valentina's door like a lioness protecting her cub. "You have no right to be here," Sofia was saying, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We have authorization from the board." The man produced a document. "Alejandro Montero has been removed as CEO pending investigation. All assets of Montero Technologies are being secured. This is a private residence, not a company asset. According to these records, the penthouse is owned by the corporation." Alejandro stepped into the room and the men froze. "Get out of my home," he said quietly. "Now, Senor Montero, we have legal authority." I said, "Get out." Something in his voice must have conveyed the depth of his rage, because the men exchanged nervous glances and began retreating. "Leave the boxes. Leave everything. And tell my mother that if I see any of her people near my daughter again, I will burn her entire world to the ground." When they were gone, Sofia finally allowed herself to tremble. "Valentina is safe," she said. "I locked her in her room the moment they arrived. She's scared, but she's safe." Alejandro pulled her into his arms without thinking, desperate for something solid to hold on to in a world that had suddenly become quicksand. "My mother killed Isabella," he said into her hair. "She just confessed, in front of the entire board. Catalina helped her." Sofia's arms tightened around him. "I know. I always suspected, but I couldn't prove it." "You knew?" "I knew something was wrong with your wife's accident. The timing, the circumstances. It was too convenient." She pulled back to look at his face. The little girl I tried to save. The one who died. She knew something too. Something about the Vega family's business dealings. She told me things a child should never have known. And when I tried to investigate, they destroyed me. What are we going to do? Before Sofia could answer, Alejandro's phone rang. Detective Delgado's voice was urgent. Senor Montero, I'm calling to warn you. Someone has filed a complaint alleging that Sofia Reyes poses a danger to your daughter. Child Protective Services is on their way to your residence with an order to remove Valentina from your custody. On what grounds? Your mother claims Sofia has been giving Valentina unprescribed medications, that she's been manipulating the child psychologically. It's complete fabrication, but they have a judge's signature. Alejandro looked at Sofia, at the terror dawning in her eyes. How long do we have? Maybe an hour, maybe less. He hung up and grabbed Sofia's hand. We need to leave, now. Take Valentina and disappear until I can sort this out legally. Alejandro, if I run with your daughter, they'll use it as proof of everything they're claiming. I'll never be able to prove my innocence. If you stay, they'll take her. And once she's in the system, my mother will find a way to get custody. She has judges in her pocket. She has the Vega family's resources. Sofia's face was pale, but her voice was steady. There might be another way. The evidence that destroyed my career was fabricated, but the original records still exist somewhere. If we can find them, if we can prove what really happened to that little girl, and connect it to what they did to Isabella, where would those records be? The Vega family has a private server. All their most sensitive documents are stored there, including the real medical files of their granddaughter, files that would prove she was being systematically abused, and that I was right to report them. Alejandro's mind raced. My company designed that security system. I know exactly how to access it. Then we don't run. Sofia's eyes met his. We fight. We gather evidence tonight, and tomorrow we burn their entire empire to the ground. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Two people who had lost everything, standing at the edge of an abyss, preparing to leap. I won't let them hurt you, Alejandro said quietly. Either of you. I know. Sofia's hand found his. I've spent 2 years alone, fighting shadows. Whatever happens next, at least I'm not alone anymore. From her room, Valentina called out for them, her small voice trembling with confusion and fear. They went to her together, a family forged in crisis, preparing to face the storm that was coming. Outside, the first raindrops began to fall, and somewhere in the city, Carmen Montero was making phone calls, pulling strings, setting traps. The battle for truth had only just begun. And in the darkness of the storm, as lightning illuminated the Monterey skyline, Alejandro held on to the only two people in the world who mattered. His daughter, innocent and trusting despite everything she had witnessed, and Sofia, the woman who had walked into his life as a stranger and become his anchor in the chaos. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together, because some battles can only be won by those who have nothing left to lose except each other. The Vega family compound sat on a hillside overlooking Monterey, a fortress of old money and darker secrets. Alejandro knew every inch of its security system because he had designed it himself, never imagining he would one day need to breach it. Sofia waited in the car with Valentina, parked in the shadows of a service road half a kilometer away. The little girl had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from a day of confusion and fear, her small hand still clutching Sofia's. Alejandro's phone buzzed with a message from Detective Delgado, who had agreed to help after hearing Carmen's confession to the board. The detective had 3 officers ready to move the moment they had evidence. The compound's back entrance opened silently under Alejandro's master code, a fail-safe he'd built into the system years ago. Inside, the halls were dark and quiet. The family was at a charity gala downtown, performing their role as pillars of society while their empire of lies began to crumble. The server room was in the basement, behind a door that required both a keycard and biometric scan. Alejandro had brought both, obtained from a former employee who had witnessed things he could no longer keep silent about. The files were exactly where Sofia had predicted, medical records showing the systematic abuse of a child over 3 years. Photographs that made Alejandro's stomach turn. Emails between Roberto Vega and corrupt medical board officials, coordinating the destruction of Sofia's career. And there, buried in a folder marked Resolved Issues, he found it. Communications between his mother and Catalina, detailing every step of Isabella's murder, the hiring of the driver, the selection of the road, the amount paid to ensure the investigation went nowhere, His wife's last moments, discussed in clinical terms as if she were nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. Alejandro's hands shook as he downloaded everything to an encrypted drive. 2 years of grief. 2 years of wondering what he could have done differently. And all along, the answers had been hidden here, protected by the very technology he had created. His phone vibrated again, this time with a warning from Sophia. Someone was coming. He heard them before he saw them. Footsteps in the hallway above. Voices he recognized all too well. "I told you we should have deleted those files years ago." Catalina's voice, sharp with accusation. "The files are insurance." Roberto's response was dismissive. "Against anyone who might think of betraying us, including your future husband." He was never going to marry me. That became clear the moment that woman arrived. "We need to accelerate the timeline, Father. Get custody of Valentina, remove Alejandro from the picture entirely, and take control of Montero Technologies before he has a chance to fight back. And Sofia Reyes? An accident. Just like Isabella. We've done it before." Alejandro pressed himself against the wall, barely breathing, as the footsteps passed overhead and faded. They were planning to kill Sofia, to take his daughter, to destroy everything he had left. He waited until silence returned, then slipped out the way he came, the evidence drive burning in his pocket like a weapon of truth. The drive back to Sofia took 15 minutes that felt like hours. When he finally reached the car, he found her pale and tense, her phone pressed to her ear. "Detective Delgado," she whispered. "Something happened." Alejandro took the phone. "What's wrong?" "Your mother's people got to the judge faster than we anticipated. They have an emergency custody order signed and sealed. Officers are on their way to take Valentina right now. We have the evidence, everything we need to prove what they've done. It won't matter if they take your daughter first. Once she's in the system, they'll bury her so deep you'll never find her." Delgado's voice was urgent. "You need to move. Now. Go to the address I'm sending you. It's a safe house. Stay there until I can get federal involvement. This goes beyond local corruption." The address led them to a modest house on the outskirts of the city, owned by a retired federal prosecutor who owed Delgado his life. They arrived just as the sun began to rise, Valentina still sleeping in Sofia's arms. "We made it," Alejandro breathed as the door closed behind them. For now. Sofia laid Valentina gently on a couch and covered her with a blanket. But they won't stop. They can't. Too many people have too much to lose. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of legal maneuvering and barely contained terror. Delgado worked his contacts at the federal level, presenting the evidence Alejandro had recovered. The recordings of Carmen's confession were authenticated. The financial records confirmed years of embezzlement and money laundering. And finally, the photographs of the abused child broke open a case that authorities had been trying to build against the Vega family for years. On the third morning, Alejandro woke to find Sofia standing by the window, watching the sunrise with tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, going to her. "Nothing's wrong." Her voice trembled. "Everything is right. For the first time in 2 years, everything is finally right." She held out her phone to show him the news alert. The headlines were everywhere. Roberto Vega arrested on charges of child abuse and obstruction of justice. Catalina Vega detained as a suspect in the murder of Isabella Montero. Carmen Montero in custody, facing charges of embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, and accessory to child endangerment. The empire of lies had finally fallen. "There's more," Sofia said, scrolling to another article. "The medical board is reviewing my case. The evidence you recovered proves my accusations were true. They're going to reinstate my license." Alejandro pulled her into his arms, holding her as she sobbed against his chest. 2 years of pain, of shame, of exile, all of it washed away by truth finally brought to light. "I couldn't have done this without you," he whispered. "You saved my daughter. You helped me find justice for Isabella. You risked everything." Sofia looked up at him, her amber eyes swimming with tears. "I was broken when I came to you. Destroyed. I thought I would never trust anyone again, never believe that good could win over evil." She touched his face. "You showed me I was wrong. We showed each other." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "Sofia, I know the timing is terrible. I know we're in the middle of chaos, but I need you to know something." "What?" "I love you." The words came out steady, certain, absolute. "Not because you saved Valentina, not because you helped expose my mother. I love you because of who you are, your strength, your courage, your heart." Sofia's breath caught. "Alejandro, you don't have to say it back. You don't have to decide anything right now. I just needed you to know that whatever happens next, whatever the future holds, I'm not letting you walk out of my life." For a long moment, she was silent. Then, slowly, a smile broke through her tears. "You arrogant, presumptuous, impossible man." Her voice was shaking. "Did you really think I would walk away after everything we've been through?" The thought crossed my mind. "Then let me be clear." She grabbed his shirt and pulled him closer. "I love you too. I've been falling in love with you since the moment you looked at your crying daughter. And let me see your broken heart. I love your stubbornness and your loyalty, and the way you look at Valentina like she's the center of the universe." Their lips met in a kiss that tasted of tears and hope and new beginnings. Behind them, still asleep on the couch, Valentina stirred and smiled in her dreams, as if she could sense that her world was finally becoming whole. Outside the safe house windows, the sun continued to rise over Monterey, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that seemed to promise better days ahead. Somewhere in the city, Carmen Montero was being led away in handcuffs, her perfectly coiffed hair disheveled, her Chanel suit wrinkled from a night in custody. Catalina Vega was screaming about lawyers and immunity deals that would never materialize, and Roberto Vega was watching his carefully constructed empire of lies crumble around him, knowing that this time no amount of money or influence could save him. Justice, long delayed, had finally arrived, and in a modest safe house on the outskirts of the city, 3 people who had lost everything were beginning to understand that sometimes the greatest treasures are found in the ruins of what was destroyed. 6 months later, the gardens of Alejandro's new estate bloomed with thousands of white roses. The property, purchased far from the shadows of Monterey, sat nestled in the green hills of Valle de Bravo, where the air was clean and the past couldn't follow. Sofia stood before the mirror in the bridal suite, her honey hair woven with tiny flowers, her amber eyes bright with joy rather than the sorrow they had carried for so long. The wedding dress was simple but elegant, chosen by Valentina with the seriousness of a 5-year-old who understood that today was the most important day ever. "You look like a princess," Valentina declared, adjusting her own flower girl dress with great ceremony. "But a warrior princess, the kind who saves people." "That's the best kind," Sofia agreed, kneeling to adjust Valentina's crown of roses. "Are you ready to walk down the aisle with me?" "I've been ready forever." Valentina rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair she had inherited from her father. "Papa keeps asking me if I'm nervous. I'm not nervous. He's the one who knocked over a whole table of champagne glasses this morning." "He did?" "Marta said he's a disaster in a suit, but like a handsome disaster." Valentina considered this. "I think that means she likes him." Sofia laughed, and the sound echoed through the room like music. 6 months ago, she had arrived at a penthouse in Monterey as a disgraced doctor pretending to be a nanny. Now she was about to marry the man who had helped her reclaim everything she had lost. The trials had been swift and damning. Carmen Montero had received 20 years for her role in Isabella's death and the systematic embezzlement of her son's company. Catalina Vega would spend the rest of her life in prison for murder, child abuse, and a host of other charges that had emerged once investigators started digging. Roberto Vega had died of a heart attack 3 weeks into his trial, his empire crumbling around him. Some said it was guilt. Others said it was the stress of watching everything he'd built collapse. Sofia thought it was probably just the universe finally delivering justice. Sofia Reyes had been fully reinstated by the medical board, with a public apology and an invitation to resume her practice at any hospital in Mexico. She had declined, choosing instead to establish a private clinic specializing in pediatric cases that had been dismissed or misdiagnosed. Her waiting room was always full. But today, she wasn't a doctor. She wasn't a former nanny. She was simply a woman about to marry the love of her life. The music began, and Valentina grabbed her hand. "Let's go, Mama Sofia," the little girl said, and the casual use of the title made Sofia's heart overflow. They walked down the garden aisle together, past rows of guests who represented the new life Alejandro and Sofia had built. Detective Delgado sat in the front row, his wife dabbing at her eyes. Dr. Herrera, who had removed the bead from Valentina's ear, smiled proudly, and at the altar Alejandro waited. He was indeed a disaster in a suit, if disaster meant impossibly handsome with eyes that couldn't look away from his bride. His smile was so wide, it seemed to illuminate the entire garden. "You're late," he whispered as she reached him. "Fashionably delayed," Sofia corrected. "There's a difference. I've been standing here for 20 minutes. Building anticipation. It's good for your character." "My character is very well built, thank you." The officiant cleared his throat. Shall we begin? Or would you like to continue your discussion of character building? Valentina tugged on both their hands. Less talking, more marrying. I have cake waiting. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. Vows were exchanged that spoke of second chances and unexpected beginnings, of a little girl's tears leading to a love neither of them had dared to hope for. When Alejandro finally kissed his bride, Valentina led the applause with such enthusiasm that she dropped her flower basket and didn't even care. The reception was held in the garden as the sun set over Valle de Bravo, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Marta, who had become the estate's head of household, managed everything with military precision, while occasionally pausing to wipe tears from her eyes. I always knew you weren't just a nanny, she told Sofia during a quiet moment. You walked into that penthouse like you owned it. Poor Senor Montero never stood a chance. I don't think any of us stood a chance, Sofia replied. Life had other plans. Daniel, Alejandro's former business partner who had helped expose the financial crimes, raised a toast that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. He had taken over as CEO of Montero Technologies and was leading the company into a new era of transparency and ethical business practices. To the man who lost everything and found something better, Daniel said, raising his glass, and to the woman who was brave enough to knock on his door. As the evening wore on, Alejandro pulled Sofia away from the crowd to a quiet corner of the garden. The stars were emerging, and the music from the reception floated toward them like a gentle embrace. Any regrets? He asked, wrapping his arms around her. Let me think. Sofia pretended to consider. I went from a disgraced doctor hiding in Guadalajara to the wife of a brilliant entrepreneur with the most wonderful daughter in the world. I have my license back, my reputation restored, and a clinic where I can actually help children who need it. She tapped her chin. No, I think I'll keep this life. You think you'll keep it? I'm still evaluating the husband. He has some concerning habits, such as, he stares at me when I'm reading. He steals the covers, and he has this very annoying tendency to be right about things. That last one sounds like a feature, not a flaw. Sofia laughed and pulled him down for a kiss. Maybe you're right. I'm always right. It's one of my concerning habits. Valentina appeared beside them, cake frosting smeared across her cheek and a determined expression on her face. The photographer says you have to come take more pictures, and I need more cake. And also, can we get a puppy now that we're a real family? Alejandro and Sofia exchanged glances that communicated entire conversations without words. We'll discuss the puppy, Alejandro said diplomatically. That means yes. Valentina was already running back to the reception, her flower girl dress billowing behind her like tiny white wings. I'm naming him Biscuit. Sofia watched her go with a smile that held no shadows, no reservations, only pure and uncomplicated joy. She really is the most wonderful child. She gets it from her future stepmother. I haven't technically become her stepmother yet. Details. Alejandro waved a hand dismissively. The paperwork is just formality at this point. The photographer did indeed require more pictures, capturing moments that would hang on walls for generations. The new family together, Sofia teaching Valentina to throw her flower crown, Alejandro pretending to be attacked by the cake, small moments that meant everything. Later that night, after Valentina had fallen asleep clutching a picture book about puppies, Alejandro and Sofia stood on the balcony of their new home, looking out at the lights of Valle de Bravo below. 1 year ago, I was the loneliest man in Mexico, Alejandro said quietly. I had money, power, everything that was supposed to matter, and I would have traded it all to make my daughter stop crying. And now? Now I have everything that actually matters. A daughter who laughs every day, a wife who makes me a better man, and a future that I actually want to live. Sofia leaned against him, feeling his heartbeat against her back. We both came from broken places, both carrying wounds we thought would never heal. But they did heal, because we found each other, because a little girl needed someone to listen to her. Sofia smiled. That's the real miracle, you know. Not the love story, not the happy ending, just the simple act of paying attention when everyone else had given up. Alejandro turned her to face him, his dark eyes shining with emotion. I will spend the rest of my life paying attention to you, Sofia Reyes Montero. Every word you say, every dream you have, every moment of every day. I promise you that. That sounds exhausting. It sounds perfect. She kissed him under the stars, in the garden of their new beginning, while somewhere inside, their daughter dreamed of puppies and princesses, and the family she had always deserved. and they all lived happily ever after. Not because life became easy, but because they faced every challenge together, with love as their compass and truth as their guide. The end was really just the beginning of forever. In the months and years that followed, the Montero family became a beacon of hope for others who had faced similar struggles. Sophia's clinic expanded, helping hundreds of children whose voices had been dismissed by the medical establishment. Alejandro rebuilt his company on a foundation of integrity, proving that success and ethics could coexist. Valentina grew into a bright, compassionate young girl who remembered the dark times only as distant shadows. She got her puppy, Biscuit, who proved to be as chaotic and loving as his young owner. And she never forgot the day a kind stranger with amber eyes looked into her ear and finally listened to what she was trying to say. Detective Delgado received a commendation for his role in exposing the corruption that had infected Monterrey's elite. He retired the following year, content in knowing his final case had been his most important. Dr. Herrera became a close friend of the family, often visiting Valle de Bravo for Sunday dinners where laughter echoed through the gardens and old wounds continued to heal. Carmen Montero died in prison 4 years into her sentence, alone and unvisited. Some said she finally faced the weight of her sins. Others said she simply gave up. Either way, her legacy of manipulation and control ended with a whimper, not a bang. Catalina Vega spent her days in a maximum security facility, writing letters of apology that Sofia never read. Some poisons, once identified, are best left untouched. And in a beautiful house overlooking Valle de Bravo, a family that had been forged in fire learned that love, true love, was worth every battle, every tear, every moment of darkness that had led them to each other. Because sometimes, the nanny who saves your daughter is destined to save your heart as well. And sometimes, the greatest love stories begin with a child's tears and end with a family's laughter, echoing through the gardens of a home built not on wealth or power, but on the unshakable foundation of love, trust, and the courage to believe that happy endings are truly possible for those brave enough to fight for them.